Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know. This is me, Greg Tito, and I'm talking to Ari Levitch. Hi, Ari.
Hello.
Welcome. This is where we usually talk about little bits of D&D lore that you can use in your game, or just it's fun to know this stuff. And this lore you should know is particularly important for D&D players who may not know very much about the Magic the Gathering plane of Theros. So we're going to go over some of the gods and deities in this thing. We talked to James Wyatt and Wes Schneider a couple weeks ago and about how the deities and demigods supplement from back in the early 80s, late 70s was an inspiration for this book. And I love that connection. Does that feel similar to you as far as getting real world inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. But like for me, Theros is particularly interesting because this was the first world that I got to do hands-on work for when I got to Magic.
No.
Yeah, Theros. They were working on. We had all the cards done. We had all the art done, but names and flavor text were still being worked on. And so one of the first projects I got to do was naming cards and kind of wrangling flavor text with a bunch of our contract writers. And so, yeah, I feel very close to this world.
Sweet. In some ways, you created these gods.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but Adam Lee, who is also on D&D, was on the Magic team, and he did create some of these gods and some of these worlds. So I had a hand in some stuff, but he was there kind of foundationally to create some of this stuff.
That's super cool. So yeah, I think we're going to talk to Adam on future Lore You Should Know, so I'll make sure and ping his brain. And
Richard Witters did a lot of the concept art for the original gods as well, or for the gods. Yeah.
It's so cool that three of you are now working on D&D and making this book happen. I wonder if there was a plan behind that.
Nah.
No, that's the funny thing is actually there was no plan. But anyway, let's get into talking about some of the cosmology and how deities kind of work on this plane, because it is a little bit different, right?
Yeah. So just kind of give you a little bit of an overview of this. As James and Wes talked about, Theros is a kind of Greek-inspired world. But it also has its own take on it. It's not just doing Greece. And what Theros has to offer is this notion of Nix. When you look outside at nighttime on Theros, you see these, just an array of constellations and kind of nebulae and a bunch of kind of cosmic phenomenon. And what's playing out there is actually you're getting a peek into the world of the gods. This is the god realm of Nix. And Nix itself has an interesting connection to the mortals of the world, because what happens in Nix is beliefs over generations and generations and generations. Beliefs start to manifest into real things. And so the gods of Theros actually were not born of some like progenitor deity or anything like that. They were created from the beliefs and kind of fears and just the different aspects of life were born from the minds of mortals and actually then gave life to these gods. And so the pantheon of 15 gods were not created by like a super deity, or they didn't come to Theros from another world. That they were actually created because of the nature of this of Nix, of this magical property of Theros and its connection to the mortals of that world. That means that some people will ask, well, does that mean that you can just kind of believe a new god into existence? It doesn't necessarily work on, if I just think really, really hard or believe really, really hard, I can create, a god of ice cream. But like, if, however, let's say ice cream was fundamental to the culture of the people of Theros, and over generations and generations, people told stories about the virtues of ice cream and had festivals about ice cream, at some point it would start to manifest in a god. So if Magic Creative, if you're listening to this next time we go to Theros, I'm just I'm just saying I could
keep all
I could
this in
still
mind.
do some of the world building for Magic even on this side of the.
Nice. What I like about that is that it also feels very similar to second edition Dungeons and Dragons, where there was this idea if you had a lot of followers, if people believed in you, then you became a more powerful deity, or sometimes we're raised to godhood by that.
Yeah, there's actually in the original card set of Theros, there's literally, or I guess it's even in the current one as well, there's literally a card mechanic called Devotion. And so it's this analog for followers in the world.
That's really cool. Sorry, I was doing a little bit of tech support on my own end while I was listening to you. So what does this mean for players as far as the Nix goes? How is this just background, or is this something that they can interact with as well?
So it kind of manifests in it shows up in the game in a bunch of different ways. First of all, it shows up visually. So all throughout the book, you're going to notice that the gods themselves or other creatures that come from the world of Nix, called Nixborn, you'll notice that visually, wherever there would be shadows in a normal creature or non-Nix creature, instead of shadows, you'd actually see that night sky star field. And so it's a visual indicator that you are seeing something of the divine. But that's Nix cool. Is also a realm. The book doesn't necessarily go into like this is how the world, or it doesn't go through all these different places in Nix, but it is a place that you can visit, and it's something that DMs could blow out more if they're interested in having their heroes go to the land of the gods. Nix itself at nighttime, if you were to look at the night sky, the myths and deeds of the gods and other heroes and actually kind of play out across the sky as this kind of this storytelling device as well.
How does I mean, I know you don't go into it too much in the book, but if you were a dungeon master and you wanted to see what Nix would feel like if you were to travel there, does it look like Mount Olympus? Does it feel like you're just in this star field, like an astral plane? Like how would you conceive of describing it to your players?
I think what I would do is have the Nix Starfield surround the entire area, and I would still have physical places to go visit. So you might have things that look like an acropolis with these stairs that kind of wind precariously through this empty kind of star void space, that kind of a thing, to show that this is not a normal mortal realm or mortal place, but this is a place of gods.
It would look like the cover of the Houses of the Holy album from Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I guess I'm just describing that. So, yeah.
You're doing it in a much more evocative way, and I'm just like, it looks like that. All right, cool. Well, so if there is this god realm, that means that there's gods living within it, and they're not, a one-to-one representation of Greek myths or any myths in our world. So let's talk through some of them and see how people can incorporate them.
Yeah, so there are 15 gods. So I remember we went through several segments to get through the 10 guilds of Ravnica. So hang on, everyone. I'm going to just choose a couple of gods at a time and just kind of walk through them. They're not in any particular order. I'm sorry, Magic Creative Team. I'm not going in color pie order. This is just gods that I feel like talking about today. So
we're going in Ari order.
Ari order. And so the first gods I want to talk about. So I have a brother. So I want to talk about two gods that are brothers that share a contentious relationship. These are the gods Mogis and Iroas. And what they both represent is together they are the gods of war. So instead of just having a singular god of war, different aspects of war have been kind of carved up between the two of them, and they are locked in this eternal struggle. Now, what you have are Mogis is the god of slaughter and violence and just rage and kind of just senseless destruction and kind of the most base elements of humanity in times of violence. And Eros is odd because Eros is both kind of communal in that Mogis wants to spread violence and revels in the idea of violence spreading among mobs and mobs of individuals. But Mogis is also very selfish because there's no sense of compassion. You could see how Mogis can serve as a great campaign villain. This idea of just whipping up mobs and fomenting violence and disrupting essentially any established order. Mm-hmm. Mogis can, those who are kind of martial-minded, Mogis can kind of get a little, can get influence, get a foothold in their psyche and turn them into what are called androphages. Androphages are individuals who just succumb to this rage, almost like in a berserker sense, and they can't dial it back. And so to counter Mogis, say again?
Patron god? Is he a patron god of barbarians and that kind of like?
Could be. Could be, absolutely. Barbarians could look to this. Could look to Mogis. Those who see just raw, brutal strength as the kind of the highest virtue might look to Mogis as well. Mm-hmm. Mogis is it is a challenge for people to find or to play as devotees of Mogis and also be part of a larger group. So it's a fun challenge to if you're a DM, asking somebody, if you're following Mogis, how is it that you have come, to be with other people? What does it mean to be a follower of Mogis to you? Now, to counter
because
Mogis,
you think by having that devotion, it just means that you should be killing everybody that you're hanging out with,
or possibly, or spreading the good word of violence.
Right, I'm a priest. You're dead. See, you just learned the word.
There are a lot of minotaurs in kind of the in the wild spaces of some of the Badlands that follow Mogis. Mogis looks like a minotaur, but with 4 horns, and so he's kind of is often associated with minotaurs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all minotaurs follow Mogis. And that's just this point I want to make before I jump into Iroas, is that on Theros, unlike Ravnica, where people choose a guild, the meat of playing on Ravnica is choosing a guild and being aligned with that guild's philosophy as an expression of who you are. On Theros, you could be devoted to a god. You could also be devoted to several gods. You might pay respects to different gods for different things. I might go to Nylea if I'm getting ready to go on a big hunt, or if I want to protect a certain animal, or protect a part of nature. I might, pay homage to Thassa if I'm going to cross the seas because she's the god of the sea, and so on. So it's not, one-to-one. I am choosing this one god to be devoted to.
It's however, a true polytheistic society.
Right. However, what often happens in Theros, and the book goes into this in great detail, is that a god might select you as a character to be their champion for something. So the gods in Theros are very meddlesome. They're not as distant as the ones in Faerun. They're much more in kind of in the business of dealing with mortals. And so there's this relationship where gods can speak through oracles, and oracles can then reach out and find champions for these gods, or the gods can visit these potential champions in their dreams and things like that. But
okay, cool.
To go back to the brothers of Mogis and Iroas, so Mogis is all the awful, terrible things about war and violence. And to keep Mogis in check, his brother Iroas, who resembles his twin brother, actually resembles a centaur, but instead of a horse's body, it's like a bull's body.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like all centaurs, they're hot.
Anyway, I'm not going to engage.
It's as an A-Rod fan, I'm sure you think that too. Anyway,
moving on.
That's so. Before we talk more about are their brothers, how were they? How do they become related in this? Were they mortals and then were elevated to this status?
No, it's the idea that they're both representations of different aspects of war. So that when they were kind of believed into being, the relationship of what they of their domains kind of cross over to the point that they are represented as brothers, even in their inception.
Okay. And then, I mean, there is some, what you're describing their appearances. There's some motifs that are similar, even if they're different.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're seen as twin brothers, but yeah, they don't necessarily share the same look. So you have Mogis, who is much more like a minotaur, and you have Iroas, who is a centaur with the body of a bull. But they are both these very powerful figures, and Eros has dedicated his existence to keeping a check on Mogis, this idea of violence. Eros is a being that understands, or at least asserts, that war is an inevitability, that violence is a part of the fabric of the world. And in order to kind of deal with that, Eros believes in the virtues of having people dedicate themselves to physical prowess and mental fortitude to be able to fight these wars. Eros is the god of victory and honor. So believing the idea that if one must fight a war, that should be done in an honorable way, almost to kind of separate from kind of his more savage brother that would kind of willing to do anything and reveling in suffering. Eros is trying to do this much more as like a sportsman.
There's something interesting. There's something interesting about what you just said. If victory is in his portfolio, which is you don't really think about in a god of war very often, but it follows exactly what you're saying. Where it's like it's not necessarily the war is not the point. The point is to win it quickly so that it ends, and have the prowess to be able to do that. But it is all about the state after war.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and there's another aspect that kind of manifests as a result of this is Eros is in constant preparation and dealing with the violence of his brother, even though he answers it with violence. But there's also a thing called the Eroan Games, which is kind of an analog, for the Olympics, where people show their physical prowess in this series of physical trials. And so an aspect of Eros is not just victory in war, that Eros sees all of life's kind of troubles or obstacles as little battles that you must be prepared to overcome and achieve victory. So there's an application to Eros' kind of philosophy in everyday life. If you're not always warring all the time, you might still look to Eros as a way, kind of as your for a pep talk, as your kind of motivational god to kind of keep you going when times are tough.
I see. Right. Because he's aspirational. Like we need to be trained and have athletic prowess in case war is necessary.
That's
and
right.
If it is necessary, to win it as quickly as possible and then get back to the practicing.
Yeah. And so you can imagine that each of these gods might find their respective champions among, great warriors, whereas Mogis would try to find warriors who show no mercy on the battlefield, who are kind of just wrecking balls and just kind of wading through ranks and ranks of other lesser warriors. And Eros would find those that might inspire others, that that are at top physical form, and so you could see where they are akin to each other, but value things differently enough to be different aspects. But at the end of the day, they are both gods of war. So you could also imagine how they could also be campaign villains. Like Mogis is a pretty obvious campaign villain, right? Mobs of Mogis worshippers, androphages. They're attacking a polis, right? Like, okay, I get it. Or they're attacking multiple polis at once. And just slaughtering the innocent. Like, I get why I'm supposed to stop this god's followers. With Eros, it might be something where Eros is blind to other concerns, that Eros is so consumed with defeating his brother, with achieving victory over his brother, that he might actually put other things in harm's way unintentionally, or may deem that your actions are not. He might deem some actions as cowardly or dishonorable, and you might find that your party ends up on the wrong side of Eros.
Does Does Eroas in his portfolio have kind of strategic thinking or tactical thinking as part of his tenets? Like, so that, I mean, that feels like it's part of victory, but I'm not sure if
Sorry, I have a
I'm
cat here.
assuming. Oh, that's okay. Does your cat have anything that he wants to add?
She probably does. Yeah, there's
Meow.
like an 80% chance that I'm gonna have to go stop Pippin from tearing up the chair back there. So
We'll roll a percentile and
Yep.
see how good we do. But yeah, is there like a thoughtfulness or a strategy kind of thought behind Eroas and how that could potentially be manifested in a villain, as you're saying?
yeah, I think Eroas, a lot of military officers might look to Eroas as well. Eroas isn't just kind of the jock brute kind of lunkhead. Eroas is about achieving victory, and with that comes sound strategy, where he would see his brother as this oafish brute who just will muscle his way and savage his way through a problem. Eroas would see the benefit of having a plan and using military resources properly and attacking as a group, perhaps in a phalanx, or and I think that strategy and even getting down to the tactical level is something that Eroas would appreciate and might inspire generals in the middle of battle and intervene on their behalf, things like that.
That's cool. Yeah, and I can also see the plan being the most important thing, right? Like, so that if you're like a chess master or something like that, that is like, I'm thinking 5 moves ahead, and your player characters might be just one of the pawns, and he doesn't really care because he knows he's sacrificing these people for the greater good, or what he's thinking is the greater good.
Right.
But then that could be a nice foil for player characters to contend against. What would a devotee of, like, instead of them being villains, how could these gods be something that the player characters are following?
So you might find with Eroas, that if you have participated in the Eroan games and you did something particularly amazing, or you won events at the games, Eroas might that's a moment where Eroas is probably watching and appreciating the physical and kind of mental prowess of those competitors. There actually might be even an aspect of destiny here, where if you're a character who was born on the eve of a major battle, that Eroas has actually been watching you since the time you were a baby, and knew that when the time is right, they'll have their oracles reach out to you and kind of bring you to his cause. And so there are lots of avenues for Eroas to. Eroas is a great kind of patron god for the hero's hero, if that makes sense. Like those who just really want to be like, I am going to be the kind of the most Greek hero I could be. Eroas is a very logical choice for that.
He's like an Achilles,
yeah,
like that type of victory and honor and arrogance. A little bit.
To a degree, I imagine there is, not to the level of one of the other gods, Heliod, who's the god of the sun, who's kind of known for his arrogance, who presumes to be the kind of ruler of the gods. But Eroas, Eroas can be very confident, but I don't know if he's defined by his arrogance so much as much as being defined by his preoccupation with his brother. That's more of his thing.
All right, so they really are a duality where it doesn't really. So you mentioned your brother. Do you feel like you have this type of relationship with him, or themes of it sometimes?
When we were younger, when we were younger, for sure. It was. There were some moments, but no, we're best friends now. But every kind of brother's story, I have like a spot in my heart for it, even if it's like Mogis and Eroas. I just always want to hear more about that. So,
if you had to pick, would you be Mogis or Eroas? And which would your brother pick?
Right now, given the state of the world, I'm probably leaning more Mogis.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I think I agree.
Yeah, I think just for self-preservation, you have to be Mogis.
Yeah.
But my brother has kids, so I think he has to be Iroas. I don't know.
That makes sense. Very cool. All right. Well, how, other than being, clerics or heroes, blessed or given benefits from these gods, how would they fit with all the other, deities and culture that's out there? You mentioned the Anoan games. Is there something like that for Mogis or some? Yeah.
So Mogis has a huge following in the Minotaur city or polis of Scophos. So he has this enormous shrine there. But in many of the other polis, followers of Mogis are probably harder to find, either because they have done away with civilization and don't live in a polis, or people who are trying to maintain order in each polis tries to keep followers of Mogis, I guess, not as prevalent, just for preservation of the polis. But Eros is, because of how central like a lot of the different polis are to where players might end up in the game. Eros is going to be much more kind of prominent, just present, because he's one of the gods of civilization. He's going to be a patron god of the different military orders, particularly in the polis of Akros, which is kind of our Sparta analog. And so you could imagine how they would look to Eros as their patron.
Cool. All right. Well, I love hearing about these. My Greek myth is, and all myths are something that got me into Dungeons and Dragons to begin with, and so I love that we are investigating this with Mythic Odysseys of Theros, and I can't wait for it to come out and have people start playing in a classical-minded game like this. I think it's fantastic.
Same. Can I share one thing that is not God related but is still Theros related?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, one thing that I'm very proud of. So I have to share this first. So a little while ago, my brother bought me a sling.
Oh, cool.
And then D&D's own Bill Benham bought slings for everyone in Dungeons and Dragons, if you might remember.
Yes.
And so I have been going slinging a lot with Adam Lee on our lunch breaks. And so in Theros, we actually get a magic item that is a magic sling. And there's another item that are magic sling stones. And I'm so excited about this because I think the sling deserves some love. So I just had to share that.
Sweet. How? So you've been actually practicing doing the and
yeah.
And
oh yeah.
How long, far have you been able to get the stone?
We haven't measured it by distance, but what we would do is we would go down to Seahurst Park, and then we would sling, because there are great smooth stones there. We just sling stones out into the water, and we can get it really, really far, like significantly farther than if I were just throwing it.
Wow!
But even cooler is we've been getting more accurate with them. So it's pretty cool. It made me appreciate how powerful these things actually are, and a D4 damage I question. As anyway, they're amazing, and I'm excited to have a magic sling now.
I know. I wonder how much more the sling would be used if it had more, damage, or just simply doing it a D6 or a D8. If that would just be like, oh, more people would use it. Because my first level wizard in first edition D&D used the sling kind of a lot because it was the only thing he could do. And it seems, it's kind of cool to see it come to the forefront.
I think in the last year, every one of my characters has had a sling, just because. I'm trying to give it some more screen time.
All right, we'll have some sling time happening. I feel like if I were doing it in real life, like you and Adam were, I would be like, what was that, Wicket from Return of the Jedi? Yep. I would totally be that they would hit himself in the face.
Don't do that. Don't do that. It's more than D4.
Did it start off with that with you guys, or did you have at least a basic understanding?
There are some dicey moments where it kind of goes backwards or straight up, or you have to get the timing right. But once you do, it's very satisfying.
Oh, that sounds really cool. And kudos to you guys for getting together and making D&D in real life. Cool beans.
Yeah.
Well, Mythic Odysseys of Theros comes out on June 2nd. It is a hefty tome full of lots of things that you can pull into your homebrew game or get inspired by. So hope people can do it, and hope everyone picks up a sling and starts throwing it around at their brothers.
Be careful.
We'll go into more gods and cultures in Theros in future segments, but thank you, Ari. How can people, if they have any questions or follow-up stuff about slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, how can they get in touch with you?
I'm at Ari Levitch on Twitter, and that's just the easiest way to do it.
Are you at? I thought you were at Winamal. Is that?
I changed it because nobody knows what that is. So that was just yeah.
Great.
It was a character I created a long time ago, and then I was like, I'm just going to change this to at Ari Levitch because I'm Ari Levitch, so it just makes it a lot easier.
I like it. All right, cool. We'll go follow Ari and pester him with nonstop questions so he can't get any work done. I mean, no, don't do that.
Don't do that. No, it's fine. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, and we'll talk more about gods soon.
Very cool. Thank you, and give some pets to your kitties. I think they
will do.
Awesome. Thanks, Ari.
See you later.